Good morning. I am Ginger Baker, and I am the Director of Elementary Education for Muskogee Public Schools. And today I am here with my co-worker, Dr. Stacy Miller, who is the elementary principal at Creek Elementary. So today we're going to be going through a slide presentation for all of you in supporting literacy and strong readers in the home. So today in our presentation, we're going to learn about the purpose of the Reading Sufficiency Act for our K-3 grade students, and we're going to identify the 5 elements of reading. We're also going to be looking at assessments given and how often that we give those assessments. And how do parents know their child has a reading problem? We're going to look a little deeper into the IPRIs, that if you do have a struggling reader at home, what that plan is going to look like for your child. And then we're going to look at watch some videos on fluent readers in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And when a reader reads, what should that really sound like? And hearing these fluent readers, you're going to be able to listen to your child read at home and know that maybe if they're a struggling reader or not. And then we're going to be talking about supporting reading at home. And we're going to identify and learn about components of reading, and then provide you some parent resources at the end of the presentation today for you to be able to go back and explore on our State Department website, and to be able to identify some things that you can utilize in the home with your child. So the purpose of the RSA law, for short, educators love acronyms. So RSA stands for Reading Sufficiency Act. This law was put in place back in the 90s, the late 90s, and so through this, it's taken some changes through time, through the years, but our legislature finds that it is essential for children in public schools to read early and well in elementary school. The legislator further finds that clear and visible goals and assessments that measure progress along with accountability in each level of the educational system should result in a significant increase in the number of children reading at or above grade level. So this law is focused strictly to kindergarten through 3rd grade students because that is early reading skills. That is where it all begins in the public schools. And so this law just pertains to those grade levels. So to ensure that each child attains the necessary reading skills by completion of the 3rd grade, which will enable that student to continue development of reading skills and to succeed throughout school and life. All teachers of reading in the public schools K-3 shall incorporate the 5 elements of reading instruction. And those 5 elements of reading instruction are phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Phonemic awareness is the sounds only that letters make. So when your child is in early childhood, they may pick up on sounds before they actually pick up on the actual written letter. And the phonics is everything letters. It could be a single letter, it might be a digraph, it could be a trigraph, it could be suffixes, prefixes. And so those are all things that are included in when a teacher's teaching reading in the reading class that she is covering or he is covering during instruction. So benchmarks, the assessments that we are required to use. One, we have to have benchmarks. And so our benchmarks are given at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and then the end of the year. What these benchmarks do is they help the teacher, it guides their instruction on how that child may be learning in the area of reading. And it allows them to see how much growth has been made from period to period. But a legislature has taken it a step further, is that when you have a reader that is struggling, you need to do more progress monitoring for those students. So our progress monitoring is through an approved screener that was approved by the State Department of Education. They give us a list, and out of the list, I think there's 8 different ones that we've had to choose from. And so through that list, we have chose Renaissance, which is called Early Lit or Star Reading. And if you have a child in 2nd grade through actually 12th grade now, all of them are involved with doing Star Reading. And what that means is this platform, when your child logs into it, they are reading for information. It doesn't get read to them. But our kindergarten and 1st grade students, they are doing Early Lit because they can't look at print yet and say what a word is. So Early Lit actually reads to them when they're on that platform. So, let me go back just a minute. So on the progress monitoring, the state says that if you have a child that's below the 25th percentile, they should be progress monitored once a week. And then if you have a student that is below that 40th to the 29th percentile, they should be progress monitored bi-weekly. So if you think about that for a moment in a classroom that has fluent readers, average readers, and then below readers, the teacher would be assessing all the time. So what we've done, we've compromised in the district for Muskogee, and so we do bi-weekly assessments. So if you have an average reader in the middle that's struggling some with some skills, or they're actually struggling a lot, we're giving that assessment bi-weekly to all students. So the teacher can choose to do those 2 at the same time. That way there's only 1 week taken out for assessment versus 1 time for a whole month, or 4 times for a whole month. And then also, what was added 2 years ago was our dyslexia screener. So the dyslexia screener is to help identify characteristics of dyslexia. We're not in the job of diagnosing students in education. So it's not a screener that says, yes, your child has dyslexia. It's a screener that's saying your child is struggling, and these are some characteristics of what a struggling student that may be diagnosed with dyslexia or dysgraphia may be experiencing. So if you're a parent and you've seen that letter come home about whether or not your student passed or failed that test, that would have led to further conversations with the teacher in regards to what the next steps could be. Next slide. So how do I know if my child is struggling with reading? 1 is communication regarding the assessments given at the beginning of the school year. So at the very beginning, as I had said, after Labor Day is when we actually begin our beginning of the year assessment. And so at that very first meeting with the parent, the teacher's going to go through this plan for you, and she's going to communicate how those test results ended up from that first screener. We have an individualized program of reading instruction, which is called, another acronym, IPRI, and that is for any student that is not reading on their grade level. So you could have a kindergartner, a 1st grader, a 2nd grader, or a 3rd grader that would experience being placed on an IPRI for reading. Teacher-parent meetings to go over the IPRI. And then through that teacher-parent meeting, you're going to hear about strategies and interventions to begin to help remediate those learning gaps. And depending on the severity of the learning gaps of a child, they will be able to see the teacher, they will be able to see that teacher for additional support, their classroom teacher, or they could possibly see a reading interventionist that pushes into the classroom or does a pull-out with a small group of students. So when I was talking about earlier the percentile of where a student would be, any student that's below the 25th percentile is being pulled by a reading interventionist or a reading specialist. Those 2, one's a certification and and the other one is just a certified elementary teacher that has had lots of years of experience teaching reading. So depending on who your child is seeing, they could be seeing an actual reading specialist that they're at their site. So the individualized program of reading instruction, we have the K-3 grade IPRI. This is the same form that we use across the grade levels that was provided by the State Department of Education. Through this, that's okay. Through this IPRI, it's a plan that a student that is not reading on grade level, so they could have came out saying that they were just reading on this. So sorry. Here we go. Does this form look familiar to anyone? Okay, so what this is the individualized program of reading instruction. And through this, it tells the purpose of what this is, and it tells you that it is a plan that will enable the student to acquire the appropriate grade level reading skills and communicate this plan in the student's progress to the student's family. So this is what the teacher in the classroom and anybody else that may be working with your child will be working with your child on throughout this. So the teacher will go through and identify each area of this plan and tell you what they're doing. So it tells you the approved screeners that we're using. And so again, we're using the STAR Early Learning Suite. They update this. This is a fluid document, meaning it's ongoing throughout the year. And anytime a student meets that benchmark screener for their grade level, for example, if you have a third grade student, the end of the year score is a 970. So there's a target score, a cut score for beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then that final end of the year assessment for a third grade student. And the same goes for kindergarten, first and second. They have different cut scores at different parts. So once they meet that score, we monitor them for 6 weeks. And if they continue on the path of meeting that benchmark and not dipping down, then they could exit off of this IPRI plan. And what that means is that your child is now caught up on any of the reading skills that they have missed from past years, that they are where they need to be for their grade level, and they can be exited. So on the ongoing one, you can go ahead and click out. We're good with this one. These are plans right now that when you come to parent-teacher conferences, if you haven't heard from a teacher yet and your child is one that is struggling, they will go over these plans with you next week during parent-teacher conferences. On the ongoing 4th and 5th, I'm a third grade student, and I've met criteria that still haven't passed a benchmark or a good cause exemption. So what does that mean? So I'm making progress as a third grade student. At the end of the year, I still haven't hit that 970 that I'm required to take. What's the next steps? Your school will have conversations with you in regards to, because remember, this is a state law, that if your child doesn't meet that benchmark or a good cause exemption, then retention communication starts. And so through a retention communication at your school, that is the principal and the teacher talking to you with the committee that has been developed for the child, and they start talking to you about options of what can happen for that fourth grade school year. So a child, if they're progressing throughout the year, but they're making small progress, they can still go to fourth grade, but know that once they go to fourth grade, they have 9 weeks, one full 9 weeks, to be able to pass that screener to stay in fourth grade. Otherwise, they would have to be put down back in third. So a lot of times we get parents that get upset by that, thinking that's the school. That's actually state law. So again, this is the document that you just saw with the IPRI. That is a form that our state, our legislatures and the State Board of Education, they came up with to help us make sure that we're teaching our kids how to read. Because what you don't want is for a child, even in kindergarten, first grade, to continue to get passed on, and they have all of these learning gaps. And so a lot of times we'll have those hard conversations with parents, and they're like, well, my goodness, they're reading at home. So they may be saying words, and they probably can identify some words, but are they comprehending what they're reading? And again, we'll watch a video on what an actual fluent reader sounds like, and then that way you can determine if that may be your child or someone that you may know that you've heard read before. So what we try to do on those ongoing ones, we protect those students by keeping them on an IPRI if they haven't met that benchmark, or if they're still struggling and not at fourth grade level. We continue to work with those students, because sometimes you're going to have a student pass with a good cause exemption. And the number one good cause exemption that most kids move on and they're still not reading on level is they've been retained before. So if they've been retained before and these struggles are still happening, we go then and we look at attendance. Is the child coming to school? Because if they have a bad attendance, if they continue to miss and have poor attendance, those students aren't getting the learning that they need to hear those reading skills in class for the teacher to be able to teach your child how to read. And remember, phonemic awareness and phonics is only taught K2. Third grade, they're reading for meaning now. They're trying to read things on their own independently and read for information where they're seeking the answers. The teacher's not doing that for them. So if they're struggling still with phonics and phonemic awareness at third grade level, it's going to continue to be a fight for them until we get them to where they need to be. Okay, so what does a fluent reader sound like? These are short 1 minute. I just want you to hear for each grade level what a first grader should be sounding like at the end of first grade.
It should sound more like normal speech. Normal first grade speech, with a few pauses and not too fast.
George Washington Carver was smart and he was kind. He used what he learned to help people have better lives. The mice are not always safe at night. The owl's big brown eyes can see even small mice in the dark.
A long time ago, there was up and about all year long, and the other animals were not too happy about it.
But remember, understanding matters. So, after reading, check that they understand. Can you show me where the problem is?
The bear keeps knocking over Mouse's house.
So what to look for by the end of the year? Readers can read words correctly at natural speed, which means not too fast to get in the way of understanding.
Does anyone have a first grade student currently? Is your first grader reading like that yet?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, let's move to second grade.
What does a second grade fluent look like? At this age, what does a important. So do we know what a daffodil is?
I'm guessing a flower.
Who are the characters?
And
Okay, and where is she?
she's at the lot in Carson Street.
So is your second grader on track? By year's end, a kid who reads fluently can read smoothly, can read with expression, and can read at a natural speed that doesn't get in the way of understanding.
So did you notice the difference in that first grader? They were still having to be guided by what we call the tracking finger and tracking words for print. When that second grader is confident in their reading and then they can read at a natural speed, she can take that library book, she can hold it in her hands, and she can find if she messes up reading, she can go back self-correct and it's not using that tracking finger any longer. So it takes a while for them to develop that, but once they continue reading, and they have to continue reading daily to continue to improve those tracking skills with their eyes, and so it just gets better and better. Okay, and here's what a third grader should sound like.
What does a fluent reader in third grade look like? Whether they're knee-deep in the Goosebumps series or reading everything they can about baseball, books are getting a little harder in third grade. Making sure they can read fluently is still very important. Reading fluently means reading smoothly with a little expression and at a speed that doesn't get in the way of understanding what they read.
One day in November 2006, a beekeeper in Florida went to check his beehives. What he saw, or rather did not see, was shock.
Each kid will sound a little different as they read. That's normal.
It is no longer a good home for any animals that live in there, including the ocelot.
The honeybees had disappeared. In all his years working with honeybees, the beekeeper had never seen anything like it. He knew that a honeybee would never leave its home to go live on its own. So where had his bee gone?
But don't forget to check that they understand what they're reading.
So what do you think must have happened?
The bees were somewhere, but the beekeeper didn't know what they are.
So is your third grader on track? By year's end, a kid who reads fluently can read smoothly, read with expression, and read at a natural speed that doesn't get in the way of understanding.
So watching that one, there's still a great difference between that second grader and the third grader. And one of those things is when it talks about expression, thank you, I don't know that I need that. When it talks about expression, that means that reader can look as they're reading text, they can see punctuation, and when they come to commas, they know to pause. When they come to an end mark, such as an exclamation mark, they know to read that sentence with excitement. So again, that progression they start learning end marks in kindergarten, and they learn what a period is, and that means to stop, and then you continue on. As they continue through first grade, they learn what commas are, quotations around what people say, and then they also learn those punctuation marks for the end. So if you can imagine that first grade year, kindergarten's introducing phonics and letter sounds. That first grade year, in my opinion, that's where the whole reading year, that's either going to be a great experience for a child or it could be a poor experience, depending on how that year went. And just going back and thinking about how we ended our year with the pandemic, those kids have never been exposed, or kindergarten and first grade, even second grade. If they were in the pandemic as a first grader, those are the kids that we're seeing in 4th, 5th, 6th grade that struggled. They were getting all of their instruction online with a teacher that they couldn't physically touch things and manipulate letter tiles in front of them. So that first grade year is so important. And so one of our initiatives for this year is just to express how important it is for attendance. And so if you are having those conversations this year, if you have a first grader and they're not reading well, Don't give up on them, because it just may not be the right time for them to pick up on that skill. Everybody's brain develops at different paces and times, and so we have to look at the age of the child. Maybe they just turned 6 when they started first grade, August 29th. Do you know there's already kids that will be 7 in January? Think of how many months difference that is between a young child and a child that's middle of the year already, that's getting ready to turn a different age. So all those things play into how a teacher teaches in the classroom with your student, regardless of what grade they're in. And so if you have to have a retention conversation with a teacher, keep in mind that if they are a first grade student, first grade is the best year to do that retention if you're going to do it. It's okay still for second grade, but they're not going to get those deep first grade skills in the classroom. They'll get them from an interventionist being pulled out from class. But that first grade year, everything is with the main teacher, the general ed teacher in that first grade room. Okay? So what resources are in place for students leaving elementary school? So we talked about third grade, that IPRI plan. If they're still struggling when they go to fourth grade, they're making progress. They pass with a good cause exemption because maybe they've been retained before, but they're still on that plan. So what do we do when it's a fifth grade student that's still choppy reading, not comprehending what they're reading? They may say words, but not know what they mean. So that means there's a deficit in their vocabulary, and there's a deficit in their comprehension of who, what, where, when, and how are the 5 questions that you would want to ask your child when you're reading with them at home. So looking at the data this past summer, with Dr. McIntosh's building, the 6th and 7th, we still had, when we first started the school year, or having those conversations, identifying our struggling readers, moving into 6th grade, we had over 200 students that we identified as having comprehension problems. That is huge. Leaving elementary, going into a building where everything you read is for meaning. And so what we found, once Dr. McIntosh got his year going, what he found was, one, he needed a remedial reading class to make sure those students were getting interventions so they could be placed in the right reading class, which means in a 6th grade reading class. Not one for 4th grade, not one for 5th grade, but where they're going to pick up and learn skills that those learning gaps that they've missed. And so through the beginning of the year assessment, what we found, the kids that were placed in those remedial classes were coming around and saying, why am I in this class? I can read and I understand what I read. So having one-on-one conversations with those students, we said, well, how did you take the end of the year state test, the OSTP, or how did you do on your STAR end of the year benchmark? Do you know those kids said they didn't take it seriously? And so they just kind of blew it off. And because they blew it off, that final score didn't get them in a 6th grade reading class. So those are the conversations that we need help with our parents at home. Once you understand the process of what we do in the school, of how we teach reading and how kids should they should progress along with their peers, those are the conversations we need for you to have with students in regards to tests. And I know sometimes as a parent myself, I would preach and preach and preach the importance of taking tests and taking them seriously. But not all kids follow directions, we know. And so some of them, again, just kind of mark down, or they don't sit and think about the questions they're answering. So Dr. McIntosh, how many kids do you have in your remedial class now?
So right now we sit at 72, and so we have already to date, with the first 9 weeks coming to a close when we start fall break next week, we have 6 that have already got in, whether they were on the tested on a second or third grade level, and in 9 weeks, they've now risen to 6th, and some have even actually went and are at a 7th grade reading level. So they'll have a celebration actually tomorrow of them graduating out. So they'll enter into a 6th grade on-level reading class when we come back from fall break.
Awesome. That is awesome. So can you imagine what we thought with 200 kids that we thought were reading behind grade level, when really that wasn't the case? After doing a deep dive into each individual student, then we were left with, and 72 is not a great number by any means, but now that allows us at the elementary level to look at those 5th grade students, the 4th and 5th grade students, to really identify and work on those learning gaps. So this year, the change that took place, Dr. Mendenhall wanted to make sure that we had 2 full-time interventionists working with students all day long in K through 5, making sure those learning gaps were closed. And so all the elementary classes now have a K2 interventionist and a 3-5 interventionist. And each of those ladies pull 5 kids every 30 minutes every day. So they're getting full intervention 5 days a week now at their buildings. So hopefully the number that we end up sending to 6th grade for next year will be much lower, and we won't have to worry about having a remedial reading class that focuses on, 2 hours a day working on reading, where we can just send them to the 6th grade reading class. Okay, do I have any questions for me before I turn it over to Dr. Miller? I know that was a lot to digest. Yes?
I have a question. You mentioned that it's Let's Get Screener. When do they do that?
So that is for 1st through 3rd grade students, and that happens at the beginning of the school year. Kindergarten, we wait just a little bit because, again, they haven't started that reading process yet at the very beginning. All of our kindergarten students will be screened in November, and then you'll get the results for kindergarten students then. And we have 30 days once we give that screener to notify the parent of the results, but usually our teachers are pretty good. The minute they give the screener, you're probably going to see a 2-week turnaround with those the results from them. Good question. Anybody else? Please know that at any time you have any questions regarding elementary reading, I can be reached. Again, my name is Ginger Baker, and I am at the Education Service Center, and my extension is 1691. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Miller, and she's going to go over the parent resource part.
Good morning. Thank you everybody for being here. My goal was to provide some activities, resources that you can do at home as a parent that it doesn't require a lot of resources other than time. I mean, you have to take time. And as a parent, I did some of these things with my children as well, and I saw the success when they went to school and their teacher talked about, well, they got better at their sight words or different things like that. Did you skip forward? I'm sorry. So it is really important to support your students at home. It's a partnership between the school and your teacher and you as well. And any feedback, and a lot of communication, anything that we can help with, we'd be glad to help. And it's important at home just to kind of do some of these things with your child. Whether they're struggling or not, you can still do these things at home. It's a good way to spend time with your student, something you have in common, and make it enjoyable, a good experience. Now, there's different activities. They range from very simple, it might be a kindergarten level, or a little more difficult, but again, it depends on where your student is at. If they're learning letter sound and identifying letters, that's going to look different than reading for meaning or focusing on fluency and expression. You always want to just try to make it positive and make it fun, because if a student is struggling with reading, my son struggled with reading and he hated it. I would try to find books that were interesting to him, or maybe even they were lower level that he could feel success with, and then as he got better, we got a little bit harder. But that's kind of the goal: make it fun and enjoy it. So developing language, I kind of took a couple of things and broke it down, and to let you know this is what you're looking for. This is what you're going to be doing with your student at home. Talking while you read. Have a conversation about a book. That'll help your student's vocabulary. Any conversation that you have with your student will help their vocabulary and their socialization skills. My husband uses big words and he forgets to explain them, but we go back and explain them. You know, here's our students or my children that they know these big words because you're having conversations with them, and a lot of times kids like to get on their device, but just have those conversations with them. Talk through the book when you read. Now that can be a picture book, so on kindergarten level you can look at what is the dog, what is he doing, or why does the little girl have that look on her face. Different things, talking through the book, engaging them and making them think and question. You can use books at home. You can use the school library, the public library. There's a lot of free digital books as well. And it's kind of whatever's most appealing to your student, because some students want that book in their hand. Other ones prefer a device. So if they're on a device, and they enjoy that, you can do that route. Speaking and listening to your student every day, again, we talked about that. Just conversations. How was your day? What did you do? What did you eat for lunch? Just kind of engaging them to speak in complete sentences, using the correct vocabulary. Ask questions that require more than a yes or no. What was your best part of the day and why? Recess or lunch is what they typically say. Well, why? Why was that the best part of your day? Again, engaging those conversations of vocabulary development. And when you're speaking to your student, you can also provide a model example of complete sentences, the way that, the structure of the sentence. So having conversations has a lot of benefits. Next slide. Linking sounds to letters. This is, again, going to be one of your, probably the lower grades more than likely. Being aware of sounds and words is important so children can break words apart orally and use those words, those sounds, to write words. So this is when the kids are learning letters, they're identifying letters, they're identifying the sound, then they're putting those letters together and they're making words. Children need to be aware of sounds and words without relating those sounds to print by using their speaking and listening skills. So you want them to know ball. You see what ball looks like, and then you know the letters that are in ball and the sounds that the letters make when they put it together. Some examples, and again, these are examples that really little to no resources other than time, just taking the time to sit down. Singing silly songs, making up silly words or sentences. Leo the lion likes lollipops. Perhaps you've got a kinder student, and a lot of times they'll have a folder that goes back and forth, and it may have letters that they're working on and sounds. So that would, of course, be your focus. You can reinforce that at home when you're doing these different activities. Rhyming words, that's a big thing. Use rhyming words that represents a relationship between words. When they recognize that those words rhyme, like fall and wall, they can use the known word to help read unfamiliar words. So if they know fall and wall rhyme, they look the same, they sound the same. What are some other words that look the same and sound the same? Hall, ball. So you're getting those groups of those families. Being able to recognize individual sounds and words is also important. I know this is a kindergarten skill. If you say sat, you want your student to know that has 3 letters. The S, at, that is what they're working in kindergarten. When they can link a letter to a sound, that's when they can begin putting those letters and sounds together to make a new word. So just different activities like that. You can make letter cards on a piece of paper, on a note card, write the alphabet. I wouldn't do them all at once. Pick a focus and work on that for a while. And so you've got, if you're talking about ALL, you could even write that on one card and replace it with different letters in the front. That's going to be the sounds. And then the SAT, 3 different sounds. That's when you may have an S, an A, and a T. and you have some kind of a word scramble and you're putting them together to see how many words they can make. So you can, I mean, you can do that anywhere. You can have them where you're taking them with you in the car, or you're at home doing that. I mean, but those are pretty easy activities to do. Linking sounds to letters. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Next slide. Blending letters, recognizing and writing words. Blending is putting sounds together to read a word. If children know sounds like F, A, N, they can blend those sounds together to read fan. So this is where they recognize that this letter has this sound. So now I'm putting them all together and I'm making a word and they're sounding this word out. You can use letter puzzles. Again, that was with the word. So the same things that you're using for the other piece, you can use for this, whether it's just on paper, on note cards, and you're kind of making it a game. How many words can you make? How many words can you make in a minute? Or what, I want you to, if you're working on ALL, how many words can you make out of that? Word families are a group of words that share the same letter pattern. And these are things that they're doing in school with their teacher, and when you're doing these at home, they make that connection. Oh, we did this in class with this letter. So you're reinforcing this at home and kind of making it into a game or something fun, or you're just spending time with your child and, you know, you're just having fun together. Word families are group of words that share the same letter pattern. By learning one letter pattern, children can learn many words at once. Again, this is the AT. So they know that cat, well, what other words can we make with the AT? Let's look at the first letter. So if you have an AT card and you're putting different letters in front of it, then they figure out, oh, I've got the AT sound. I can make sat, bat, rat, mat, and the goal is when they're reading, they're going to recognize these words because they know cat, but I see hat, so I know what act sounds like, so it's got the H on it. So it's kind of just putting those pieces together for kids, and that light bulb clicks on and they see the connection. Again, with letter cards, I mean, those, you can't go wrong if you just make your letter cards. You can use them for everything. Store them in a baggie, store them in a pencil box, and pull them out whenever you have time. High-frequency words are words that appear frequently in books, such as the, was, Make cards with those and play memory games. Again, a lot of times, kindergarten, first, second, they're going to have their word list. As a parent, I had words on note cards everywhere, and we focused on maybe 5 at a time. Or what if your teacher sends the list home, then we're working on these words, so you can work on them at home. And they really do appear in text a lot. I did this with both of my children. I had one child that was very not a phonological reader. He did not sound words out, he memorized them. So looking at these words and memorizing these words, when they appeared in a book, they were like, oh, that's the word we worked on yesterday, or that, and so they recognize the words. I mean, it really is beneficial, and there'll be different levels. You'll have a kindergarten list, a first grade list, a second grade list, and you may have third graders that still haven't mastered those words, and working on them at home or reinforcing at home. And the teachers in the classroom they can tell you where they're at in their word list, what word list they need, because this is part of some of those assessments that they're doing on the lower levels. Next slide. Reading for understanding. So these are more the third grader that you saw reading. They're not struggling with so much, I don't know this word. They're trying to read it and pull meaning out of it. You can support your student in reading accurately, at a good pace, with expression, so that they understand what they read. So you're going to see different places where your student is at. And again, by modeling these things, where sometimes we read so fast and it sounds like that. When you're reading with your student and you model it at a good pace, or when you use expression, it's exciting when you hear students read, just like the little girl in the video. You know, some students will read, the barn is on fire. The barn is on fire. So when you're kind of making those expressions, they're going to pick up on those and then talk about, you know, it ended in an exclamation mark, so I showed strong feeling. Modeling those things with your students and then having those conversations about the book and asking questions. So if you read with your student every day, model how to read words correctly, quickly, and with expression. Sometimes our older students will hear fluency and we want to read quickly, and that doesn't mean read it so fast you don't ever pause. It just it's read it smoothly. And you can model that when you're with them. Talk about what you read. You can ask them questions, ask them their opinion, and again, those questions may start with a yes or a no answer and then kind of build on that. And well, why do you think that? What made you think that? Things like that, to where they're explaining and they're thinking about. So that's the comprehension piece. Experienced readers know what they're reading, know when their reading does not make sense. So you'll see a lot of times students will self-correct. They read something and they mispronounce the word and it didn't make sense, so they stop. But you can also help with that when your student is reading, or you can even model it. Pretend you mess up on a word and say, wait a minute, that didn't make sense, that didn't sound right. And you go back and correct it in front of your student, and then you're having them do it. Give them a chance to correct it, and if they're not, if they don't even notice, that's when you might step in and say, did that sound right? Did that make sense? And then you'll see that they'll start doing that eventually for themselves, because that wasn't right, wait a minute. And they'll go back and reread the sentence. They can often correct their own mistakes. Beginning readers don't always notice when they misread a word, so that's where you come in, where you catch it and did that sound right? By showing children how to self-correct when they misread a word, it helps them become better readers, because they're monitoring their own reading and they're making the corrections themselves, because they know, again, it didn't sound right and it didn't make sense. As you read with your student, provide examples of how to recognize when words are misread by thinking out loud, and that's that whole conversation. That doesn't make sense. Did that make sense? Did that sound right? Those are big cues that if you model this over and over, they're going to start doing that. I mean, I've seen it in the classroom. I've seen it at home with my children, having to say that, and then the first time wait a minute, that didn't sound right. Yes. So, I mean, they will pick up on it, and they will begin to use these things to make their reading better so their comprehension is better. Next slide. So here are some parent resources. These, again, are some digital resources that are free, and if anybody would prefer me to email these to you, I'll get something you can write down your email. If you need some high frequency words, you might reach out to your student's teacher. That's their word list. Or if I can email those to you, anything to help. Read at home plans. This link takes you to another site that has little videos of specific activities, just to kind of model it and show you what that looks like when you're sitting with a student and you're doing the word puzzles, or maybe you're questioning them about the book. Get ready to read. Reading Rockets. Storyline Online. I use that in my classroom as a teacher. You've got famous people, actors, different people that are reading a book, and it's kind of it almost plays out like a movie, but they're sitting there reading it, so your students or your kids are, oh, well, I saw that person on TV, and they're watching them read. ABC Yaw. Again, there's several different resources that are free online that your kids can use and set when you're in a car driving somewhere, and you're just waiting, and you can have, we'll do 20 minutes of this, or some of them, the kids will be asking you, can I get on ABC Y'all, can I? So it's just helping them build those skills. But again, if you're interested, I do have a few more that different teachers in different buildings use for free, and they tell their parents, hey, get on these websites. So write your email down and I will send you this list, or anything that I can do to help. I would be glad to help, because I've seen it as a teacher and as a parent, an educator. If we are working together as a team to make our kids successful, and they see the effort that we're putting in, they're more likely to put in some effort because my teacher cares. That my teacher wants me to read, or I get to read with mom or grandma when I get home, and that's something they look forward to a lot of times. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, y'all keep saying kindergarten. We have kids for K also. I have a 4-year-old. I have 5 kids. She learned from her other siblings.
And they do that at ECC. Now, preschool is not a requirement in Oklahoma, but our students that are at ECC, I apologize, are doing a lot of those things that look identical to kindergarten, or they're getting them ready. I mean, those kids, when they leave, some of them are reading, they write their name, they recognize their letters, and I apologize, I didn't say preschool, but again, they are doing those standards. I mean, they have to turn in lesson plans, they're doing a lot of the things that our kindergarten students are doing, so that when those pre-K kids move to kindergarten, they already know how to write their name. They already know how to count to 10. They can write their numbers to 10. So they're really not just playing all day. Now, they learn through play, because that's going to keep their attention better than sitting at a desk, because they're doing centers, maybe they have magnetic letters, or they may even have some of those cards or different things in there, making their name with the cards. And I don't know if that answered your question, I apologize.
It is just, I think I kept saying kindergarten, my 4-year-old, she started writing her name and stuff, so why not include them in this?
Well, and I apologize, I think just because, I mean, my daughter at 4 was doing some of the things too as well when she was 4 before she went to kindergarten. But not everybody will enroll their student at ECC because it's not required in Oklahoma. But thank you for that. We will add that when we present this again.
And the purpose of today was to talk about the Reading Sufficiency Act, which is a law, and it only governs K through 3. That's it. So our preschool, they are learning, they're doing those early intervention checkpoints to get them in kindergarten so they'll be a successful kindergartner. So, but that's the reason they weren't mentioned at the beginning, because I was only discussing kindergarten through 3rd for that, okay?
But anything that you do at that level just helps your student when they progress, because they're coming in, and you've got other kids that are coming into kindergarten that didn't go to preschool, so they don't know their letters and they don't know their name. So that's really awesome that, they already know how to write their name, and so they can work on taking that a little bit further, so they'll always kind of be hopefully ahead of the game. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my son, he's in the 4th grade, so he was, end of kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, we in the pandemic, being COVID. He missed completely, he just did the work, he didn't really retain the information. So when he got to 3rd grade last year, he was in the
IPRI.
I know we have conferences next week, and that was his struggle in 3rd grade, and that was the reason why he was there. I know, like, the first 9 weeks of 3rd grade, they did an enrichment in fines and things that they should have learned in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. What can I do? Because I have, like this summer, we went back to these little things he's not into that anymore, but it teaches the phonics. And it was so hard to help him with 1st grade things. He's like, I'm going to 4th grade. I'm like, I understand that, but you didn't learn this. Is there anything that I can do, or I just see what his teacher says at the conference next week?
Collaboration with the teacher is going to be really important, so you can see exactly what those gaps are. And I know, so my son struggled. I retained him in 1st grade. He was furious at me, and he was embarrassed because other kids were reading these bigger books, and he's like, this is a baby book, I'm not a baby, I'm older than, but I tried to, it was a little rough for a while working on some of those things, like the specific, this high frequency words. I had those things all over my house because he's not a phonological reader. At that point, he memorized them. So, and that to him maybe wasn't like the baby book, but we were still playing games. Those words, something like that, those words, after you start looking, they appear in book so many times, and it may just be where they're not sounding it out, they're memorizing it. And when he saw those words, that was a big push, because I thought, how is this gonna help him? But going through all of that, it really did make a difference, because he thought, I recognize this word, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's a consistent effort. We took a little bit of those words and mastered them and moved on, because you don't want them to move on if they're not ready, because then they feel like they're failing again. So taking it in pieces, talking to the teacher, because they're going to do specific assessments that are going to tell you where he's missing. And then maybe there's a book that, kids will go in the library and the cover looks really cool. And so they check out that book, or because it doesn't look like a baby book and they want to be like their friends and they can't really read it. So saying, hey son, check out a book at school and bring it home and we'll read it together, or I'll read it with you, and then you can even go back and talk to him about it. So he's read it at home when he comes to school, he knows. So just stuff like that. And it's tough because they want to be like their friends. They don't want to be a baby. But I would definitely say talking to the teacher, and because we do have reading interventionalists in every building that are focusing on K2 and 3-5, they're also going to get that extra time with that person who they're going to be focused on those individual skills where they're not just, they're going to get those little skills, and in the classroom they'll get their grade level skills. So, but just hang in there, as I promise you, I've went through it with my son. He said, I'm not going to school. You can call the police on me. I don't care. I'm not going. We were to that point. But after he started improving, and it was a lot, I will say, because we worked all the time, he got better, and it wasn't awful to go to school. So just, communicate with the teacher, or don't ever hesitate to say, I don't see any improvement. Here's what I'm doing. What else? What are you doing at school? Or what have you seen success with? Or, the reading interventionals, anybody at the building or anybody in the district would love to help, and just you're getting different perspectives or different ideas. So I hope that answered your question.
And there's also an online platform. It's called Imagine Learning. It works on the 5 elements of reading. So that he will have his sign in. So the teacher during the conferences, if you'll ask her for his login information, that's something you can do on your phone. If you have a computer at home, an iPad, whatever, and he would be able to work on that at home. At school, they get about 20 minutes a day on that. So him doing it additional time at home would be helpful.
And I can show it to you before we leave.
Perfect. Okay, I have 2 resources, and I'm not going to go into detail with you because they're kind of self-explanatory. I just wanted you to have these examples. This first one is why I can't skip my 20 minutes of reading tonight. You always hear teachers say, and it's part of the reading plan usually, don't forget to read tonight for 20 minutes. So it shows you a student A, student B, and a student C just in the amount of time that they read. If they get in 20 minutes a night, it shows you how many words in a year that they could be exposed to. Versus that student B it may be reading only 5 minutes each day, and see the difference in how many words they're exposed to. And so, and in order to be exposed to words print all around us, even reading road signs, restaurant signs, those kind of things. But I thought this was just good information to put in your hand. And then the second one is what our day looks like in regards to assessment at school. So that screening process, the beginning of the year screening, then the progress monitoring, they're taking diagnostic tests through the year, and then we end with the summative, which is the next benchmark. And so just for you to have that information. We also have Lisa Yahola. She is the director of secondary here, and she's just going to talk a minute about secondary students.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things because I realized that what Dr. Miller and Ms. Baker talked about today was geared to the younger students. But the brain is like any other muscle in your body. The more you work it, the better it becomes. So if you want to run faster, what do you need to do? You need to run, right? If you want to run faster, you got to run. If you want to jump higher, what do you have to do? You have to jump. If you want to read better, you have to read, even if it's difficult. So when you get those kids in 6th or 7th grade that are no longer bringing like a reader home for their 20 minutes of reading every night, they still need to be practicing reading at home. And you can do that through a variety of methods. You can get them magazines. They can download stories to read. The public library now has a digital library card, so you can sign them up for a digital card and they can download as many or read as many books through the public library here in town as they want. Just things that are getting them reading continually, graphic novels, things that they're interested in, but still they're reading. And then you can still go back and ask them their questions. You know, what are you reading? What is it about? Oh, I see you have a manga book. Tell me about that story. And they can go back and tell you, well, there's a character and his name is Akira or whatever, and tell you all about that. You just want to keep them interested in reading. And then another thing that I read in a parenting magazine several years ago was, because I was not an avid reader, but I wanted my children to be avid readers. And so one of the things that the parenting magazine says, if you want your children to be readers, then they need to see their parents reading for pleasure. And reading was not pleasurable for me. I did not like it. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but I did want them to be readers. And so I started getting books and reading them for pleasure. And I would sit in the living room, as hard as that was for me to not pay attention to the TV, and I would read books in front of them. I also had lots of magazines that I would bring home and read, just so that they see you reading and see the importance of that. I think that's everything I was going to say. Do I still need to?
Yep. Okay.
You want to go ahead and introduce our next guy. If you does anybody? I noticed over here that you had a question earlier when we were talking about the. Okay. Anybody have questions about older readers?
Yes. Most of the older kids get on social media.
Yes.
They're reading on social media. Is that happening also? Did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Sometimes it's been 2-3 hours on that.
Yes, especially if they're looking at articles. If they're going to things like Twitter, where that's linking them to current events that are happening, or articles that are things that are going on, even if it's about celebrities. I mean, what's going on with Tom Cruise right now? He's going to start a new movie and blah, blah, blah. Just to getting them exposed to reading any content, and then if you can go back and ask them, what story did you read today on social media, or what information did you get? Tell me 3 things you learned from social media today. Just so that you can kind of test if they are comprehending what they're reading on there. And then they also, something that you could always tell them, if they come to a word in an, you know, when I was young, we didn't have computers and phones and, you know, all of that. So if I ever came to a word that I didn't know, I would take that to my parents. My mom and dad made me go look it up in the dictionary. Actually, I was a little bit of a nerd, but I carried a dictionary in my backpack with me, because if I didn't know how to pronounce a word, I would look it up and figure out how to pronounce it. But they have online, dictionary.com now, so if they come to a word, not only can they type that word in, it will also say the word for them so that they can figure out how to pronounce it. So in their head, when they're reading that in context, then they can read that word properly. So those, I mean, you have such great tools in just your little hand with your smartphone. So encourage them to do those things. And if you don't know that vocabulary word, look it up. If they come to you and ask you, hey, what does this mean? Well, let's look it up. Google it. Tell me what it says, and we'll see if we can figure that out. Just to get them used to doing that type of research for themselves. Anything else?
Thank you, Mrs. Yahola. And I just want to reiterate, so grateful that you all have come out today. We have an additional team member that's here through the OSU Extension. His name is Mr. Robbie Horn. He's right here. And so I'm going to have him to come up and share for just a few moments about an initiative that is here to further support some of our kids and families. And then I'm going to close us out after Mr. Horn comes up.
Thank you, Dr. McIntosh. There we go. Thank you, Dr. McIntosh. Like Dr. McIntosh said, I'm Robbie Horn. I'm with OSU Extension, and I am the field coordinator for a new program called Strong Dads. And research shows that when dads are involved with their children, they get better grades in school, they're more likely to go to college, they have more confidence in themselves, they demonstrate greater self-control, they engage in fewer delinquent behaviors, and less likely to be incarcerated. So our program, Strong Dads, it's a parenting class specifically for dads or father figures. So any male that's in a fathering role, it could be a grandfather who is now taking care of a grandkid, or an uncle who has found himself in a parenting role. So any male that's in a parenting role. And our program is designed to help dads gain tools and support to be the best dad they can be. And there's 5 characteristics that we go over in our program. And it's a strong dad. He knows his strengths and weaknesses. He cares for himself, knows how to father, knows how to parent, and there is a difference between those two, build healthy relationships with family and community. So our program is a 12-week program where dads will come once a week. We'll have them share a meal together, we'll engage in group discussion, we'll check in with their fathering coach and to help the dads reach their goals. With our program, transportation assistance is provided, as well as other incentives up to $100 for participants. I see that we have a lot of, it looks like moms in the room, maybe. If this is something that you know that a dad who needs this, maybe even a new dad, expected dad, that needs this, if you would want to talk to me at the back, I have some information back there. I have a wrap card that has a QR code that you can scan with your phone, pull up the information for the class, and even have a place to register for the classes. Our classes are going to be starting soon. As soon as we we need to have about 12 people per class to get started, so I'm working on building those. If you're interested or know someone interested in these classes, please come to the back and talk to me.
Thank you, Mr. All right. And so, Dr. Robert.
Oh, it is a free class, so no, there is no charge.
Any credit? Do you get any credit?
Yeah, so I'm going to do this because I don't know how loud I am back there. So the program, if you complete it, you will get a certificate of completion that it will cover if a dad is court-ordered to take parenting classes. It will cover those requirements. Also, if a dad is going through a divorce and has to do co-parenting classes, it will cover the dad's co-parenting classes. And Dr. Rogers, if you have another question.
Just curious where it will be held?
Right now, the plan is to have it at the library again, once I have a full cohort, I'll be asking dads when and what works best for them. So right now, the tentative plan is Monday nights at the library.
Thank you, Mr. If there's any questions, he's going to stay around at the back table so that if you definitely feel led, if you know someone also, any male role models in the community, that'd be great to give up your time as well. He and I had spoke as well prior to at the 6th and 7th grade academy on some of those things that it looks at role models and having a strong male presence, as we know that that's definitely needed. We've got 2 more initiatives similar to this for our Lunch and Learn that's going to be coming up later in the next upcoming months. For November 9th, if you'll mark your calendars, same time, same location. We may not be in this room, but we'll definitely be here at the King Center. And we're going to be looking at how we are responsive and giving awareness to you for if a child is struggling in any measure, looking at as well what are the supports that we have in district to really know what to ask for. Many times if it is counseling services, if we know, I know Dr. Rogers is here today, but with our counseling agencies, how we provide wraparound supports for our kids, and then also when a child is struggling academically. I know that we talked about, and socially and behaviorally as well. Mrs. Yahola and Mrs. Baker talked specifically about some of the measures that we take place as far as instruction, but many times we've also found that kids are struggling, and it may be that for whatever reason, there's additional measures that we can take, and so we want to look at the whole child, and in doing so, we want to be able to talk to you about what some of those site-based plans look like. Mrs. Teague is here today. This is our director for special education, and so you'll be hearing from her and some other team members, administrators as well, throughout our district and at that specific Lunch and Learn. And then also we will have one in December that's focusing on attendance. Dr. Mendenhall, our superintendent, has made it abundantly clear that's one of our priorities for us in this upcoming year. Coming out of COVID and just all of the various different things that many of you, as well as myself and others, have gone through, specifically our children, though, it is just, it's a challenge to make sure that they're at school every day, and we want to make sure that we leave no stone unturned as it relates to their attendance, because we know when they attend, they win, and so attend and win. That is our slogan that we are really focused on committing to and ensuring that we're providing various measures to ensure that your child is able to come to school each day, and that we can limit any barrier that we possibly can to make that a reality. This concludes our Lunch and Learn for today. We're so thankful that you came out. Please make sure there were a whole host of various resources that we have for you that were printed, and then also the way that you registered. That'll be the same way, but that'll be an uploaded, there'll be a new revised flyer that'll be coming out at the various school sites. So again, please note that we're here. We definitely want to continue to have these, and definitely if there are additional needs that you have, as Mrs. Baker spoke, our main service center number is definitely always willing to take your message and feedback, and we definitely want to make sure that you come out and also spread the word, because again, we're together in this hand in hand. Achievement will stand. So again, just know that we're here. We hear you. We want to continue to support and make sure that every child in our district is successful. All right. So thank you again. Please know if there's additional food, help yourself, and this will end our time for today. So thank you.